Though horror villains come in all shapes and sizes, many of them share one trait: they're highly intelligent. Some, like Hannibal Lecter, may be crazy and boundlessly evil, but they have enough brainpower to evade the law and repeatedly outsmart the heroes. Devious masterminds like this can be cornered, incarcerated, and supposedly defeated, but they often still find a way to bounce back. But as we've established time and time again, horror villains screw up all the time. They can spend years perfecting their scheme and prepare a dozen contingencies, only to fail due to a simple but crucial oversight. While such antagonists like to believe they are running rings around their prey, the smallest factor can cause their whole plan to go belly up. By underestimating their victim and falling for an obvious trap, these evildoers found themselves imprisoned, dead, or worse. Some entries on this list may be dumber than a bag of hammers, others are bona fide geniuses with doctorates and diplomas to spare. Regardless of how smart they are though, these villains were woefully unprepared when it mattered most. I'm Sean Ferry for What Culture Horror, and here are 10 even more horror movie villains who were completely unprepared. Number 10. Athena Stone, The Hunt. Not to be mixed up with the 2012 film of the same name, 2020's The Hunt follows Crystal, a young woman who finds herself and many others being hunted for sport by a group of elites. Speaking to other victims, Crystal learns the event was orchestrated by a powerful entrepreneur called Athena Stone. Several months earlier, a group text between Athena and her upper-class friends leaked, suggesting she hunts the working class at her manor. But when Crystal finally confronts her, Athena explains that group text was a joke. When her messages appeared online, internet trolls weaponized it into a conspiracy known as Manorgate, destroying Athena's reputation. Seeking vengeance, Athena made Manorgate a reality, capturing and killing anyone who contributed to the conspiracy, including Crystal. Athena smugly reads out Crystal's online messages surrounding Manorgate, hoping to humiliate her. Despite investing a ton of time, effort, and money to complete her revenge, Athena made one huge mistake. After speaking to her abductee, Athena realizes this isn't the same Crystal who spread the rumors. Instead, she's a different Crystal who happens to have a similar name. Refusing to admit her mistake, the deranged elitist fights Crystal, which results in Athena's death. Watching Athena chastise Crystal for only believing what she wants, only for her to do the exact same thing, is deeply satisfying since it proves how much of a delusional hypocrite she was. Number 9. Seth and Richie Gecko, From Dusk Till Dawn. After a bank robbery goes awry, the Gecko brothers, Seth and Richie, force themselves on the RV of the Fuller family, which the criminals ordering the Fullers drive them all across the Mexican border so they can escape the authorities. Throughout From Dusk Till Dawn, Seth proves to be immensely resourceful and adaptable. Even when he's on the run or clearing up his brother's mess, Seth seems one step ahead of everybody and believing he can walk out of any scenario, no matter how dire. However, Seth and Richie change their tune when they enter a Mexican strip club with the Fullers as their hostages. When one of the customers harasses Seth, he shoots him, apparently ending the conflict. But as the club patrons begin sprouting fangs, the Geckos realize every person in the establishment is a vampire. Despite Seth's best efforts to take control of the situation, Richie is sucked dry by one of the vamps almost immediately, and even though Seth puts up one hell of a fight, he's unable to save most of the Fuller family. Although Seth managed to walk out of the place alive, it was at great sacrifice. Number 8. Herzog, Dead Snow 2, Red vs. Dead. Like the original, Dead Snow 2 has our hero, Martin, squaring off against Nazi zombies, led by the tyrannical ghoul called Herzog. Mere seconds after the sequel kicks off, a Nazi flesh-eater chomps on Martin's arm, forcing him to lob it off with a chainsaw. When Martin awakens in the hospital, he learns a zombie arm has been surgically attached to him by mistake, compelling him to attack anyone nearby. Just when it looks like things couldn't get worse, Herzog uses dark magic to resurrect hundreds of corpses, creating a battalion strong enough to take over the region. Since Martin is unable to control his undead arm and Herzog's forces grow every second, the Hitler-loving Revenant is 100% confident nobody can stop him. But when Martin finds that his zombified appendage belongs to Herzog, he realizes he can resurrect the dead too. Using his newfound power, Martin revives the Russian Red Army that Herzog exterminated during World War II. With his own supernatural army at his side, Martin is able to overpower the enemy forces and defeat the Nazi leader once and for all. Number 7. Lestat, Interview with the Vampire. In this Anne Rice adaptation, 200-year-old vampire Louis recounts his extravagant life to a reporter, detailing how, as a plantation owner, he was turned into a vamp by an aristocratic bloodsucker called Lestat. Detesting his bloodthirsty lifestyle, Louis intended to leave his maker. That was until, suspicious of those intentions, Lestat turned young Claudia into a vampire, urging Louis to stay and care for her. Seeing Louis and Claudia at his property, Lestat is convinced he has absolute authority over the pair, urging them to do his Claudia's bidding. 30 years later, the now mature Claudia has become frustrated that she's forever trapped in her child body, especially since Lestat refuses to treat her like an adult. Believing she and Louis are better off without him, Claudia coaxes Lestat to drink the blood of a dead body, making him violently ill. In his weakened state, Claudia and Louis slit Lestat's throat, dump him in a swamp and set him on fire. Though Lestat lives, it takes over 150 years for him to recover psychologically. Although Lestat believed he was the cat of the walk for centuries, underestimating Claudia's cunning and tenacity cost him dearly. Number 6. Adrien Griffin, the Invisible Man. The Invisible Man opens with C leaving her tyrannical partner, Adrien Griffin. When it's reported that Adrien has taken his own life, C feels unburdened for the first time in years. However, after being attacked by an unseen force, C is convinced her abusive partner has turned himself invisible and faked his death so that he can continue to torment her. After the brute frames her for murder, she's locked up in a psychiatric institution. Once C has a later encounter with this rogue, she shoots him dead, only to discover that the perp is Adrien's brother, Tom, who'd been stalking her in a light-cancelling tech suit. By the time the police storm Adrien's house, they find him tied up and seemingly imprisoned by his sibling. Of course, this was all part of Adrien's master plan, since he and his brother took turns torturing C in the invisible outfit. However, he insists Tom is responsible for everything, allowing Adrien to get away scot-free. Certain he's fooled everyone, the pompous industrialist encourages C to return home to him, claiming he's a changed man. Little does Adrien know, C has plans of her own. After heading to the bathroom, C puts on the invisible suit and kills Adrien in a way that makes it look like suicide. Even though Adrien believed he had power over his wife, C proved to be the stronger of the two. Number 5. Annie Wilkes, Misery. Misery. The movie that made humanity find a newfound appreciation for their ankles. In Rob Reiner's psychological thriller, renowned author Paul Sheldon is rescued from a severe car crash by a local called Annie Wilkes. Being a former nurse and a huge fan of Sheldon's work, Annie initially comes across as a guardian angel. However, when Sheldon realizes his rescuer has complete lack of marbles, he plans to escape as soon as possible. Despite doing all he can to avoid arousing suspicion, Annie learns what Sheldon is up to and crushes his ankles with a sledgehammer. Though Sheldon acts defeated, he has no intention of giving up. To ensure Annie doesn't become suspicious of his next escape attempt, the crafty writer preys on her greatest desires, saying he'll perform a murder-suicide with Annie to symbolize their love if she lets him write the perfect ending for his last novel. Won over by his romantic gesture, Annie reluctantly agrees. Just as Sheldon finishes writing the last page, he burns the whole book in front of Annie. Desperate to know how the story ends, she tries to put out the fire, giving Sheldon the opportunity to kill her. Although Annie was extremely clever, Sheldon knew she was easily overwhelmed by her emotions and used that knowledge to outsmart her. Number 4. Stephen Wilkins, Trick or Treat. Michael Dougherty's Halloween-themed anthology is filled to the brim with all sorts of twists and surprises, with each chapter set up one way only to veer in a totally different direction. Case in point, school principal Stephen Wilkins. Though he seems like a gentle soul, Wilkins is actually a psychopathic child murderer. Worst of all, he's teaching his son the tools of the trade, molding the boy into a serial killer. After seeing this sick terrorizing and slaughtering kids, it's safe to assume he's the biggest monster in the neighborhood, but that isn't the case. When Wilkins sets his sights on meek trick-or-treater Laurie, it looks like she's dead meat. Ironically, it's Wilkins who ends up becoming the prey, after being lured into the woods by Laurie and her gal pals. He sees a slew of dead bodies on the ground, suggesting the girls are killers. It's even worse than that for Principal Wilkins though, as Laurie and her friends shed their skin, sprout fur, and Wilkins realizes he's surrounded by werewolves, pathetically begging for his life much like his victims did to him before the she-wolves devour him. Number 3. The Kidnappers, Abigail. In this campy horror comedy, a group of criminals kidnap ballet dancer Abigail, hoping to get a hefty ransom from her super-rich father. Believing the hard part is out of the way, the kidnappers take the girl to an isolated mansion and wait for dear old dad to pay up. Though the group believe they have all their bases covered, they have no idea what's in store for them. We do, of course, thanks to the spoiler-laden trailers, and once they discover Abigail's father is an infamous crime lord, several of them try to leave. After learning the building has been sealed shut, the criminals realize they've been screwed over. Just to add one more problem to the pile, the helpless little abductee is revealed to be a 300-year-old vampire. When Abigail isn't pirouetting on staircases or sashaying through corridors, she's tearing off heads and ripping off faces. Despite being experts in the criminal underworld, the gang is pretty clueless when trying to take out the tutu-wearing maniac, including one of them using onions instead of garlic to try and immobilize Abigail. The criminals prove to be so unprepared throughout the entire operation, it's a miracle that they last as long as they do. Number 2. Cecilia Pederson saw X. Despite being elderly, frail, and riddled with cancer, John Kramer should never be underestimated. Even when he's injured, cornered, or dead, the guy always seems to have backup plans within backup plans. Too bad Cecilia Pederson learned this the hard way when she encountered Kramer in Saw X. This prequel opens with a gravely ill antihero readying for an experimental medical procedure, which is funded by Cecilia. After the so-called operation is complete, Kramer discovers the treatment is a scam to steal money from terminally ill patients. The Jigsaw Killer reacts the only way he knows how, kidnapping Cecilia and her team and forcing them to play his games. When another conned patient called Parker enters the facility, Kramer believes he's found an ally. But when Parker is exposed to Cecilia's partner, he releases her and holds Kramer at gunpoint. Shortly after, they hear Carlos, a young boy Kramer befriended earlier, and just to prove Parker and Cecilia really are the worst, they force the kiddo and Kramer into the final trap. Just as it looks like Cecilia and Parker have come out on top, a deadly gas starts seeping into the room. Through a series of flashbacks, it's unveiled that Kramer knew Parker was dirty to begin with and orchestrated everything to ensure Cecilia and him would walk into the gas room. Though Cecilia believed she was holding all the cards, John Kramer once again proved that crossing him never ends well for anybody. Number 1. Chris and Billy, Carrie, 1976. The bullies in Carrie really picked the worst person possible to mess with. In the first scene of this Stephen King adaptation, our titular teenager freaks out after having her first period, since she never learned about menstruation. Due to her overreaction, Carrie is maliciously taunted by her classmates. As punishment, Carrie's main tormentor, Chris, gets banned from the upcoming prom. Out of spite, Chris and her boyfriend Billy devise a plan to tarnish Carrie's name beyond repair. Firstly, they rig the prom so Carrie is elected queen. While she's on stage, she's doused in pig's blood from above, humiliating her in front of the entire school. Although Chris and Billy believe the prank went off without a hitch, there was one thing they never predicted. By an astonishing coincidence, Carrie happened to develop vast psychic powers not too long before the prom. So, when Carrie saw everybody in the auditorium cruelly laughing at her, the usually timid girl finally had enough. Refusing to live as a punchline, Carrie uses her telekinesis to set the room on fire, burning every student, teacher, and faculty member alive. Well, apart from Soul Survivor Sue Snell. For Chris and Billy, they're the last people at the prom who Carrie kills, giving them just enough time to understand how royally they messed up before Carrie causes their car to crash in a fatal explosion.